I turn out differently, I get that. And I have some sympathy, I could have been a contender. I bottom through the preventer, I sidestep fate and go for infamy. Maybe choice is an illusion. Maybe the joy's in the doing. Maybe the world we build a new one. Maybe it's Matryoshka, maybe it's tree rings riding without the thing at its heart. You were hoping I'd turn out differently, I get that. And I have some sympathy, I could have been a contender. Upon the preventer, I sidestep fame and go for infamy. Hey, good evening. So I was making music and then I noticed it was time to start. I'm gonna go get a book. Books are useful when one hopes to read books. Yeah, so we're 5 parts into the Carasoyn by George MacDonald, 1866, in the public domain. And all I have to do is find my page. Good evening. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're basking in the togetherness. Because that is a thing that we really have right now. Chapter 9, The Fairy Fiddler. The father thought over many plans, but never came upon the right one. He did not know that they were the same tribe which had before carried away his wife when she was an infant. If he had, they might have done something sooner. At length, one night, towards the close of 7 years, about 12 o'clock, Colin suddenly opened his eyes, for he had been fast asleep and dreaming, and saw a few grotesque figures which he thought he must have seen before, dancing on the floor between him and the nearly extinguished fire. One of them had a violin, but when Colin first saw him, he was not playing. Another of them was singing, and thus keeping the dance in time. This was what he sang, evidently addressed to the fiddler who stood in the center of the dance. "Peterkin, Peterkin, tall and thin, what have you done with his cheek and his chin? What have you done with his ear and his eye? Hearken, hearken, and hear him cry." Here Peterkin put his fiddle to his neck and drew from it a wail just like the cry of a child, at which the dancers danced more furiously. Then he went on playing the tune the other had just sung in accompaniment to his own reply. Silver snout, short and stout, I have cut them off and plucked them out, and salted them down in the Kelpie's pool, because Papa Colin is such a fool. Then the fiddle cried like a child again, and they danced more wildly than ever. Colin, filled with horror, although he did not more than half believe what they were saying, sat up in bed and stared at them with fierce eyes, waiting to hear what they would say next. Silver Snout now resumed his part. Ho, 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 and if he don't know, and fish them out of the pool, so. Here they all pretended to be hauling in a net as they danced. Before the end of the 7 long years, sweet babe will be left without eyes or ears. Then Peterkin replied, Sweet babe will be left without cheek or chin, only a hole to put porridge in. Porridge and milk and haggis and cakes, sweet babe will gobble till his stomach aches. From this last verse, Colin knew that they must be Scotch fairies, and all at once recollected their figures as belonging to the multitude he had once seen frolicking in his father's cottage. It was now Silver Snout's turn. He began, But nevermore shall Colin see sweet babe again upon his knee, with or without his cheek or chin, except... Here Silver Snout caught sight of Colin's face staring at him from his bed, and with a shriek of laughter they all vanished, the tones of Peterkin's fiddle trailing after them through the darkness like the train of a shooting star. Hello, Francarito. Chapter 10. The Old Woman and Her Hen. Now, Colin had got the better of these fairies once, not by his own skill, but by the help that other powers had afforded him. What were those powers? First, the old woman on the heath. Indeed, he might attribute it all to her. He would go back to Scotland and look for her and find her. But the old woman was never found except by the seeker losing himself. It could not be done otherwise. She would cease to be the old woman and become her own hen if ever the moment arrived when anyone found her without losing himself. And Colin, since that time, had wandered so much all over the moor, wide as it was, that lay above his father's cottage, that he did not believe he was able to lose himself there any more. He had yet to learn that it did not so much matter where he lost himself, provided only he was lost. Just at this time, Colin's purse was nearly empty, and he set out to borrow the money of a friend who lived on the other side of Dartmoor. When he got there, he found that he had gone from home. Unable to rest, he set out again to return. It was almost night when he started, and before he had got many miles into the moor, it was dark, for there was no moon, and it was so cloudy that he could not see the stars. He thought he knew the way quite well, but as the track, even in daylight, was in certain places very indistinct, it was no wonder that he strayed from it and found that he had lost himself. The same moment that he became aware of this, he saw a light away to the left. He turned towards it and found it proceeded from a little hive-like hut, the door of which stood open. When he was within a yard or two of it, he heard a voice say, "Come in, Colin. I've been waiting for you." Colin obeyed at once, and found the old woman seated with her spindle and distaff just as he had seen her when he was a boy on the moor above his father's cottage. "How do you do, mother?" he said. "I am always quite well. Never ask me that question." Well, then I won't any more," returned Colin, "but I thought you lived in Scotland." "I don't live anywhere, but those that will do as I tell them will always find me when they want me." "Do you see yet, mother?" "See? I always see so well that it is not worthwhile to burn eye light. So I let them go out. They were expensive." Where her eyes should have been, there was nothing but wrinkles. "What do you want?" she resumed. I want my child. The fairies have got him." "I know that." "And they have taken out his eyes." "I can make him see without them." "And they've cut off his ears," said Colin. "He can hear without them." "And they've salted down his cheek and his chin." "Now, I don't believe that," said the old woman. I heard them say so myself," returned Colin. "Those fairies are worse liars than any I know. But something must be done. Sit down and I'll tell you a story." "There's only 9 days of the 7 years left," said Colin in a tone of expostulation. "I know that as well as you," answered the old woman. "Therefore, I say, there is not time to be lost. Sit down and listen to my story. Here, Jenny." The hen came pacing solemnly out from under the bed. "Off to the sheep shearing, Jenny, and make haste, for I must spin faster than usual. There are but 9 days left." Jenny ran out at the door with her head on a level with her tail, as if the kite had been after her. In a few moments she returned with a bunch of wool, as they called it, though it was only cotton from the cotton grass that grew all about the cottage, nearly as big as herself, in her bill, and then darted away for more. The old woman fastened it on her distaff, drew out a thread to her spindle, and then began to spin. And as she spun, she told her story, fast, and Jenny kept scampering out and in, and by the time Colin thought it must be midnight, the story was told, and 7 of the 9 days were over. "Colin," said the old woman, "now that you know all about it, you must set off at once." "I am ready," answered Colin, rising. "Keep on the road Jenny will show you till you come to the cobbler's. Tell him the old woman with the distaff requests him to give you a lump of his wax." And what am I to do with that? The cobbler always knows what his wax is for. And with this answer, the old woman turned her face towards the fire, for, although it was summer, it was cold at night on the moor. Colin, moved by sudden curiosity, instead of walking out of the hut after Jenny, as he ought to have done, crept round by the wall and peeped in the old woman's face. There, instead of wrinkled blindness, he saw a pair of flashing orbs of light, which were rather reflected on the fire than had the fire reflected in them. But the same instant, the hut and all that was in it vanished. He felt the cold fog of the moor blowing upon him, and he fell heavily to the earth. Thanks for coming around again, guys. Planning to finish the Carasoyn by George MacDonald, 1866, tomorrow night. 6th installment. The previous 5 installments are available on my Facebook page. Hope you will check them out. Now, of all times, be good to one another.